Friends, what is the true cost of COVID 19 to the world? What appeared initially to be a pretty innocuous infection has turned out to be a nightmare for the world. COVID 19 has demonstrated a social and economic vulnerability far beyond what the experts had imagined in the first place. It is important to understand what is the true cost of COVID 19. What has it cost to the world? Lives lost, people lost, emotions to people you were attached to? Is it the financial cost to the economy? What eventually is the cost, true cost of COVID 19? In a recent paper, David Cutler and Lawrence Summers of Harvard estimate the total cost of COVID 19 to the United States alone at $16 trillion. This amounts to 75% of a year's US gross domestic product. Almost half of this is the cumulative value of lost GDP, estimated by the non-partisan Congressional Budget Office. The rest is the cost of premature death and impairment of physical and mental health according to values customarily used for the world's richest big economy. The total cost, according to these authors, is 4 times more than that of the Great Recession and aftermath of it 2008 financial crisis. If the cost to the world were also to be 75% of the annual GDP, then the cumulative total would come to around $96 trillion at the purchasing power parity exchange rates. That is almost certainly a huge sum. Now, let's look at it from a different perspective. So far, the global death toll of COVID 19 is estimated at 1.4 million. Deaths are now running at a little under 10,000 a day, or about 3.5 million a year, if you were to annualize it. If this were maintained, then the cumulative deaths over the first 2 years might reach close to 5 million, or just over 0.6 or 0.06% of the global population. To put this in the right context, the Spanish flu, which emerged in 1918, lasted 26 months and cost somewhere between 17 million and 100 million lives, or between 1 and 6% of the then global population. A comparable death toll for COVID 19 today would be between 80 million and more than 400 million. Some pandemics, notably the Black Death in the 14th century, have been far more lethal even than the Spanish flu. But as the medical science progresses, the ways of combating, developing weapons, vaccines, and quickly able to counteract the infection at a rapid pace has grown. So you do not see such a large percentage of the population getting impacted as was the case in the Spanish flu. A 2006 report from the CBO argued that a pandemic involving a highly virulent flu strain, such as the one that caused the pandemic in 1918, could produce a short-term impact on the worldwide economy similar in depth and duration to that of an average post-war recession in the United States. But Spanish flu killed about 675,000 Americans out of the then population of just 103 million. That is equivalent to over 2 million today. If the CBO had been right, then the economic impact of this pandemic should have been vastly smaller than it has been so far. A similar study for the European Union Commission, also published in 2006, concluded that although a pandemic would take a huge toll in terms of human suffering, emotions, and loss of mental and physical health, Yet, it would most likely not be a severe threat to the European macroeconomy. That conclusion was, to put it aptly, quite wrong. Why then has the economic damage of such a comparatively mild pandemic been so huge? Why? Well, it is something which is a matter of great conjecture, and there are many answers to it. Well, it's also the level of preparedness. Not people had been expecting that such a pandemic would hit the economy, and the preparation levels, although we had somebody like Bill Gates and many others who had been warning of such a pandemic, but nobody really thought that it was really going to happen. Prosperous people can easily dispense with a large population of their normally daily expenditures, while their governments can support affected people and businesses on a huge scale. But this is also what people expect from the governments. And right now we've seen that economic stimulus which is in America is beginning to run out. So that's what the need for another stimulus. But this is what the rich governments provide to their population. And that keeps them going even in the times of a pandemic like the COVID-19. We are prepared to pay a vast price to contain pandemics, and we can do so far better than before. Some argue that the methods chosen, notably undiscriminating lockdowns, have been largely responsible for these huge economic costs. Instead, they suggest that the disease and so the ill should have been allowed to roam freely, while seeking to shield only the most vulnerable of the population. Now that is a very questionable thing, because the higher the incidence of the disease, the more people will be determined to shield themselves on their own. A point which was made in the International Monetary Fund's latest World Economic Outlook. So if you read the IMF's World Economic Outlook, that's what they would underline. Actual experience, as opposed to cost-benefit analysis of theoretical alternatives, further strengthens the case for suppressing the disease fully wherever it is feasible. A recent paper from the Institute for New Economic Thinking, to save the economy, save the people first, it suggests why. A chart which they have published shows that countries have followed two strategies: suppression or trading off deaths against the economy. By and large, the former group has done better in both respects. Meanwhile, countries that have sacrificed lives have tended to end up with higher mortality and economic costs as well. Many countries in the European Union are clear examples of this. Now, amidst a second wave of infections and lockdowns in Europe, the failure to persist until they achieve full control over the virus in the first wave looks like a gross mistake. Of course, effective testing, tracing and quarantining would be better still, but that is impossible if infection rates are close to the recent levels. We still have a great deal to learn, of course, from the COVID-19 pandemic, and we must do so, because the next pandemic could be far more lethal than this one. In the meanwhile, we must seek to escape from the current disaster as well, and as quickly as possible. This will, of course, need a high level of global cooperation. While the costs of the pandemic have been quite extraordinary, so happily has been the scientific response. Big Pharma has been criticized for not coming out with innovations rapidly and for overcharging them for their patented drugs. But this time they have come to the rescue of humanity. Developing a vaccine in just over 10 months is really noteworthy. So Big Pharma is back with a revenge. While the costs of the pandemic have been quite extraordinary, so happily has been the scientific response, as I said. Now, vaccines must be produced and distributed across the world. An important step is for all the countries, including the United States, to join COVAX, which is the initiative to provide vaccines worldwide. Global challenges need global solutions. COVID-19 has turned out to be a far more devastating economic shock than economists had anticipated. This is a lesson in itself. And even more virulent disease is perfectly conceivable, and one cannot rule it out. Next time, we must suppress the new disease far more quickly. Many new prate about freedom, but the people's safety should remain something above everything else. Today also, and tomorrow as well. Health comes first, friends. Take care. Bye bye.